At the very beginning of this textbook, the authors state that conflict is inevitable. And because adults spend so many hours at work, it's understandable that conflict may migrate into the workplace. The authors also state that how you manage this conflict can determine your success or failure in your chosen career. Therefore, it's imperative that you know how to manage conflict effectively in this environment. Workplace conflict is defined the same way that we defined interpersonal conflict at the beginning of this course. However, there is one significant difference. While in both situations the parties perceive they have incompatible goals, they also perceive some form of interference or the lack of the ability to control their resources, and there's a sense of urgency about the need to resolve the conflict. But the significant difference is that the conflicting parties are interdependent through their workplace relationship. Unlike conflict which may occur through personal or social relationships, workplace relationships are unique because they're more or less mandatory. They're forced, in other words. Typically, you don't get to choose who your boss is or who your coworkers are. So let's take a look at what are some of the causes of workplace conflict. Oftentimes, conflicts arise out of differences in goals, and some of this information should sound familiar because we've talked about it earlier in this course. One of the first forms through which conflict may occur related to goals is that of instrumental or task responsibilities. This is where there is disagreement over how to get the job done. Think about your own work experience, and I believe you'll recognize it's beneficial if all workers support a common understanding of the organization's task or instrumental goals. You may have heard the saying, everyone must be on the same page, and that's reflective of this type of conflict that could occur. When people aren't in agreement, you may hear a comment such as, that person's not a team player. However, not all conflict related to task goals is necessarily negative. One of the benefits of a work team is the different perspectives, experiences, and knowledge that each member brings to solving the task or completing the job to be done. Therefore, to yield the best results, you would expect or maybe hope that there would be some form of conflict or disagreement or variation of how the task or job should be completed. Relationship conflict occurs when workers experience with one another issues over power, trust, supportiveness, competition, and differences over the rules that really govern the relationships and how people are to work and interact with one another. Oftentimes, organizations will have policies to clearly establish the expectations regarding relationships between employees. For example, an organization may have a policy forbidding nepotism, or there may be a policy forbidding managers to supervise someone who's related to them. Organizational charts also frame the formal links between employees and who reports to whom. In other words, to whom in the organization are you accountable to? Identity conflict is connected to the person's position in the organization. Identity goals relate to desires for status, prestige, and authority. Bosses and employees want to be treated with respect, and they want to feel valued and their contributions acknowledged. Conflict occurs when others treat a person contrary to the way that person sees himself or herself. You may have even heard the term insubordination, which is related to this type of conflict. This refers to the act of willfully disobeying or defying an authority figure's reasonable expectations. It often involves when an employee refuses to follow a directive from a manager or a supervisor, or perhaps even go beyond the boundaries of his or her authority. Process conflict involves disagreements over the management style that is typical of a particular organization. For example, maybe one organization uses centralized decision-making versus decentralized decision-making. A manager may employ a democratic leadership style whereby he or she solicits input from their employees in contrast to an authoritative leadership style, which does not. Just as these are potential causes of conflict in the workplace, another source of conflict is within the work group itself. Conflicts may occur as a result of the group development process. Think about your own experience working in groups. Chances are that on day one, you didn't join a work team and become immediately integrated into the group's workflow, processes, or even acclimated to the culture and expectations of the group. When people work in groups, whether newly created or joining an existing group, there is a developmental process and the potential for conflict. The textbook provides a group developmental model that was actually created by Bruce Tuckman in 1965. This is known as the forming, storming, norming, and performing model. Tuckman maintained that these phases are all necessary and inevitable in order for the team to grow, face up to challenges, tackle problems, and find solutions, and deliver results. Let's take a look at each of these stages. Forming is the first stage of team building. The team meets and learns about the opportunity, challenges, agrees on goals, and begins to tackle the tasks, and this is where conflict may occur. Team members tend to behave quite independently. They may be motivated, but they are usually uninformed of the issues and objectives of the team. Team members are usually on their best behavior, but very focused on themselves. Sharing the knowledge of the concept of teams is extremely helpful to the team, and supervisors need to be influential in this stage. Next, groups enter the storming stage, in which different ideas compete for consideration as people begin to identify with their roles within the group. The team addresses issues such as what problems are really supposed to be solved, how will they function independently and together, and what leadership model will they accept. In some cases, this storming phase can occur quickly. However, in other situations, the team may never leave this stage. The maturity of some of the team members usually determines whether the team will ever move out of this stage. Immature team members will begin acting out to demonstrate how much they know and to convince others that their ideas are correct. Some team members may also focus on minute issues to evade the real work to be done. The storming stage is necessary to the growth of the team. However, it can be contentious, unpleasant, and even painful to members of the team who are averse to conflict. Tolerance of each team member and their differences need to be emphasized and recognized. Without tolerance and patience, the team will fail, and this phase can become destructive to the team and will lower motivation if allowed to get out of control. Next, at some point, the team may enter the norming stage and fall into regular patterns of work. Team members adjust their behavior to each other as they develop work habits that make the teamwork seem more natural and fluid. Team members often work through this stage by agreeing on rules, values, professional behavior, shared methods, and working tools, and even what is accepted and what's not accepted. During this phase, team members begin to trust each other, and motivation increases as the team gets more acquainted with the project and the people involved. Also in this phase, supervisors tend to be more participative than in the earlier stages, and the team members can expect to take on more responsibility for making decisions for their professional behavior. Then the groups progress to the performing stage. These high-performing teams are able to function as a unit and find ways to get the job done smoothly and effectively without inappropriate conflict or the need for external supervision. At this stage, team members have become interdependent and work together. Interestingly, dissent is expected at this stage and allowed as long as it is channeled through means which are acceptable to the team. It's important to note that even the most high-performing teams may revert to earlier stages in this model in certain circumstances. Many long-standing teams will go through these cycles several times as they react to changing circumstances. For example, there may be a change in leadership which causes the team to revert to the storming phase. The last phase, the termination phase, is actually one that Tuckman added after the model had originally been established. In this adjourning phase, this occurs once the team has completed the task and breaks up or the work concludes. Others also call this the mourning phase. In this phase, the work or the task may come to an end, or the organization or the group may change. Conflict can occur because people may not want to move on or accept the new dynamics of the group. Sometimes groups can get marred down in a work process and eventually become frozen or paralyzed, at which point conflict occurs, and leadership must determine the course of action to resolve this conflict. The authors don't include this in the text, but it's also important to note that a termination ritual or some type of event which symbolizes that the work has come to a close is very important. There's value in acknowledging that the job or the work has been completed. It offers a form of closure that really helps the group members advance to the next phase or the next project. As you can see, there is potential for conflict at every phase of the group development process. There's also potential for conflict in the various roles that people play within groups. A role is a pattern of behavior that characterizes an individual's position in the group. The authors present three common categories of roles that are played in groups. Those are task roles, maintenance roles, and disruptive roles. Task roles pertain to the work that the group must do to accomplish its goal. And here are examples of various task roles that an individual may take on or adopt. The role of initiator is when someone comments or launches a discussion or moves the discussion in a new direction. Information or opinion givers provide content for the discussion, and most likely everyone should fill this role at some time during the discussion. On the other side of that is the role of information or opinion seeker. This individual probes others for their ideas and opinions on issues before the group and asks for more information that's needed. They may ask for clarification or point out that insufficient information has been presented to draw a good conclusion. The analyzer checks to see if the information is accurate, consistent, valid, and if there may be hidden agendas presented in the discussion. The role of orienter indicates that the group may be off track, summarize the points of agreement or disagreement, and help the group move forward. Maintenance roles pertain to group behaviors that keep the group working together smoothly and cohesively. Here are some examples of maintenance roles. First, gatekeeper. This person keeps the communication channels open during the discussion and manages the flow of communication so that all members have an opportunity to participate. If someone has been extremely quiet during a discussion, the gatekeeper may call that person out or ask for their opinion. The encourager provides recognition and encouragement for the group members, shows appreciation through verbal and nonverbal cues, recognizes and rewards positive contributions. In other words, that's a great idea. That person would be the encourager. The harmonizer intervenes in group discussions to help reduce tension and straighten out misunderstandings in the group. For obvious reasons, the person who takes on the harmonizer role needs to tread carefully and objectively. A tension reliever recognizes when group members are stressed or tiring and intervenes in some way that help relieve the stress or re-energizes the group. A good example of this is maybe if you've ever been in a discussion that's just been very heated or very emotional and someone makes a joke to kind of lighten up the moment. While task and maintenance roles are positive and have a positive influence on the group's productivity, the third category, disruptive roles, are negative. Disruptive or self-centered roles reflect specific patterns of behavior that focus the attention on an individual's needs and goals at the expense of the group. Some examples of disruptive roles would be the aggressor who seeks to enhance their own status by criticizing almost everything or blaming others or deflating the ego or status of other people during the group discussion. An individual may also play the role of a joker, in which they attempt to draw attention to themselves by clowning, mimicking, or just making a joke of everything. This person is not doing this to relieve stress or to be productive. Instead, their behaviors are just disruptive and annoying. Another disruptive role is that of blocker, who routinely rejects others' views or stubbornly just disagrees with everything the group decides or shares. And again, they do this not necessarily for the best interest of the group, but rather for their own interest and their own passive-aggressive way of trying to control the group. Then the final disruptive role is that of monopolizer. This is the individual that talks all the time and dominates the discussion, giving the impression that they're well-read and knowledgeable and of value to the group, but perhaps they really might not be in reality. In contrast to the monopolizer would be the person who withdraws from the discussion, who refuses to be a part of the group either by not participating or by not even being physically present. Importantly, please note that individuals may play one or many of these roles throughout their experience in workplaces and workplace situations. And as you can tell, they can either be positive and contribute to the effectiveness of the group, or negative and disrupt or interfere with the progress of the group, resulting in conflict. The authors conclude this chapter by examining conflicts in the workplace due to several different variables, including diversity among members, pressures outside the workplace, in other words, work-life conflicts, and workplace bullying. Note that this textbook was published several years ago, and much has changed since then. Today, there is a heightened awareness and recognition of the value all individuals bring to the workplace. The authors state in the book that there is no law preventing workplace bullying. However, I wanted to share with you that while there is no federal or state law, 25 states have proposed variations of the Healthy Workplace Bill in regards to workplace bullying. And bullying can become illegal if it crosses into harassment or discrimination based on protective characteristics such as race, color, national origin, religion, sex, age, or disability. In conclusion, it is not surprising that conflict is present in the workplace. In fact, the authors of the textbook state that approximately 20% of a manager's time is spent resolving conflict. By recognizing the potential causes of conflict in the workplace and the influence of the dynamics of group behavior, hopefully when you are presented with conflict situations, you will be able to manage them effectively.